I saved an old lady's life on the street and got fired because I was late for work, but then this happened. John was late again, and as he ran through the streets of Birmingham, he could only think about what Mr. Evans, his boss, would say. "Damn, I can't be late again. Mr. Evans is going to fire me this time for sure," he muttered to himself, dodging the people rushing on the sidewalk. He tried to run even faster, but the crowd wasn't helping. "Sorry, excuse me," he said, trying to squeeze past a group of pedestrians. The clock was ticking and time was running out. "I just need a few more minutes," John thought out loud, panting, as he saw the distance to the apartment building where he worked. Even though he knew he was late, John stopped at a small cafe on the corner. He felt he needed coffee to wake up properly. He looked at the watch on his wrist and sighed, trying to decide if it was a good idea. It'll be quick," he mumbled to himself, stepping inside. The bartender, a smiling old lady, quickly asked, "The usual, John?" "Yeah, the usual, please," he replied, glancing at the door like Mr. Evans might show up any second. He knew that if any resident from the building saw him away from his post, it would be a huge problem. While the coffee machine buzzed, he thought, "If Mr. Evans finds out I stopped here, he'll kill me." But the smell of coffee filling the air made him relax a little. "Here you go," said the barista, handing him the cup. "Thanks," John said, grabbing the drink and rushing out. But as he took the first sip, the worry still followed him. "I hope no one noticed the front desk is empty. Steve leaves right on time, whether I'm there or not," he thought, feeling a bit uneasy. As John hurried along sipping his coffee, something caught his eye across the street, like a shadow of someone falling. There was an old lady lying on the sidewalk, not moving. Instantly, his heart raced. "Oh my God, what happened to her?" he thought. Without thinking, he ran across the street, nearly dropping his coffee cup. When he got closer, he saw the woman seem to be unconscious. "Hey, Mom, are you okay?" he asked, kneeling beside her. But there was no answer. He looked around, hoping someone would come to help, but the street was strangely empty at that moment. "Damn, I need to do something," he said to himself as he put his hand on her shoulder, trying to wake her up. John quickly realized that the lady had tripped and hit her head, as there was a small cut on her forehead. He knew he had to act fast. "Calm down, John. You know what to do," he told himself, trying to stay calm. He gently turned the woman onto her side to make sure she could breathe properly. "Come on, Mom, stay with me," he murmured as he checked for other injuries. She still wasn't responding, which made John even more anxious. His heart was racing, but he knew he couldn't let fear take over. With one hand, he grabbed his phone from his pocket and dialed emergency services. When they answered, he spoke quickly. "A lady fainted here on the street. I think she hit her head. I need an ambulance fast." While he waited, he kept her head steady and looked around, hoping to see the ambulance lights. "It's going to be all right, ma'am. Help is on the way," he said softly, more to calm himself than anything else. A few minutes later, the ambulance sirens broke the silence of the street. John stood up quickly, waving to the paramedics. When they got closer, one of them asked, "What happened here?" "She was unconscious when I found her. It looks like she tripped and hit her head," John explained. Still nervous but relieved to see help had arrived, the paramedics moved quickly. One checked the lady's vital signs while the other prepared the stretcher. John stepped back a little, giving them space to work, but stayed nearby, watching. "We're taking her to the hospital now," said one of the paramedics. "Are you a relative? We need a witness." "No, I just found her here, but can I come with you?" "Sure, hop in the ambulance." John didn't think twice. He got into the ambulance with them, sitting next to the unconscious lady. The door closed and the vehicle sped off through the streets of Birmingham, with the lights flashing and the siren echoing through the city. On the way, John looked at the woman, worried. "I hope she'll be all right," he thought. He knew he'd made the right choice by staying with her. John checked the time on his phone with a heavy heart. 2.5 hours had passed. He'd missed all that time from work while helping the lady, and each passing minute only made him more anxious. Mr. Evans must be furious by now, he thought, imagining the pile of complaints that were probably piling up at the front desk. Sitting in an uncomfortable chair in the hospital waiting room while filling out an admission form, he couldn't stop tapping his foot nervously. Every time his phone buzzed in his pocket, he felt a knot in his stomach. There were several missed calls and messages from his boss. "Damn," he muttered to himself, glancing at the screen again but too afraid to answer. As the minutes dragged on, John kept thinking about how he was going to explain being late. He knew he had done the right thing, but would Mr. Evans and the residents understand? I should have gone straight to work. But what if she had died there on the street? His mind was racing with thoughts. Every now and then he glanced at the door where the doctors had taken the lady. Is she okay? He wondered, worried about the woman, but also knowing that the longer he waited, the worse the conversation with his boss would be. John kept remembering the woman's face, unconscious and alone in the middle of the street. He sighed deeply, trying to justify it to himself. I couldn't just leave her there. I know Mr. Evans won't like this, but what else could I do? He grumbled quietly, still staring at his phone. Another missed call. He wiped his forehead, thinking about what was coming next. The hours were slipping by and the guilt of missing work was growing inside him. He knew the front desk was unattended, and any problems that happened would all fall on him. It's over, he muttered. John's phone vibrated once more, and this time he knew he couldn't avoid it any longer. It was Mr. Evans. He took a deep breath before answering, already expecting the worst. John, where the hell are you? Mr. Evans's voice came through loud and angry on the other end of the line. I had a problem, Mr. Evans, John tried to explain, his voice shaky. I found a lady passed out on the street and I had to help. I'm at the hospital now, waiting for news about her. At the hospital? Mr. Evans interrupted, sounding impatient. And what about the front desk, John? Did you forget you have a job? The residents are furious. The desk's been unattended for hours. That's a huge security risk. John was silent for a moment, feeling a lump in his throat. He knew this was going to happen, but he didn't think it would be this bad. I know, Mr. Evans, but I couldn't just leave her there. I thought it would be quick, but things got complicated. I did what I thought was right. What you thought was right, his boss practically shouted. Your job is to be at the front desk. That's your responsibility. The other workers already gone and the residents are demanding answers. They're threatening to sue the building management if we don't take action immediately. I can't do anything else, John. I tried to hold it off, but they want you gone. John felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. He knew this could happen, but hearing the words was much worse than he'd imagined. You're firing me? John asked, his voice low, barely believing it. I have no choice. The residents are calling for your head. I'm sorry, but it's done. You're fired, John. Pick up your things tomorrow and good luck. The call ended before John could respond. He stood there, staring at the phone in his hand, trying to process what had just happened. His chest tightened, the weight of being fired crashing down on him. It felt like his world had collapsed in an instant. I lost my job, he thought quietly, feeling his stomach turn. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but the feeling of defeat was overwhelming. Mr. Evans' words echoed in his head. Fired. For doing the right thing. It was hard to accept. All the effort, the hours running through the city, the care he'd always taken at work, and now for trying to help someone he had lost everything. But as the sadness and anger bubbled up, a part of John knew he couldn't have done anything differently. He thought about the lady he'd found lying in the street. What if I hadn't helped? What if she was still there alone, he reflected, trying to put things in perspective. He looked at the people in the hospital, coming and going, each with their own story. He felt a small sense of relief in his chest. He knew that, despite losing his job, he had done the right thing. His clear conscience gave him a peace that helped hold back the tears. I did what anyone would have done, what I had to do, he said to himself with a sigh. Deep down, he knew that even with everything falling apart around him, he couldn't regret it. More than just a doorman, he had been human. The next day, still shaken by losing his job, John couldn't stop thinking about the lady he had helped. He wondered if she was all right, if she had woken up, if her family was with her. It weighed on his mind. I need to know what happened, he murmured to himself, picking up the phone. With his hands still trembling from nerves, he dialed the hospital's number. His heart pounded as he waited for someone to pick up. Soon, a receptionist answered with a calm voice. St. Mary's Hospital, good morning. Good morning. I'd like to know about a patient. She was brought in yesterday morning, an elderly lady who fainted on the street. I'm the one who called the ambulance, and I just want to know how she's doing, John explained, trying to stay calm, but his anxiety was clear in his voice. The receptionist paused. "Do you know the patient's name?" John hesitated. He didn't know her name. I don't know the name. She's an elderly lady. She was unconscious when I found her. I know she was brought in yesterday." "One moment, please, I'll check." John waited, biting his lip, the silence on the other end feeling like it lasted forever. Finally, the receptionist returned. "The lady you described was transferred to another hospital, but her condition is stable at the moment." John felt a mix of relief and worry. "Transferred? To which hospital?" "She was taken to Central Hospital. They have a more specialized treatment unit for her case. If you'd like more details, I suggest you call them directly." "Thank you. Thank you so much," John said, hanging up the phone with a sigh of relief. At least she was alive. That was all he needed to know for now. Later that same day, John decided to follow the receptionist's advice and called Central Hospital, where the lady had been transferred. He was still nervous, not knowing what to expect, but he needed answers. As soon as the call was answered, he spoke. "Hi, good afternoon. I'm calling to ask about a patient who was transferred there today. She had a fall on the street and I was the one who helped. I just want to know how she's doing." The nurse on the other end replied, "Sure, do you know her name?" "No, I don't know her name. I just know she's an elderly lady and she was unconscious when they took her." There was a brief pause and John could hear the sound of typing. "Ah, yes, I've found her. The patient is Dakota King." The name made John freeze for a second. He had heard that name somewhere before, but he didn't know where. Dakota King. It sounded important, familiar. He shook his head, refocusing. "And how is she?" "She's still in critical condition. We're monitoring her closely, but the situation is delicate." John was silent for a moment, processing the words. Critical condition. The lady was fighting for her life and he felt even more connected to it. He knew he'd done everything he could, but it was hard not to feel a bit sad. "Thank you for letting me know," John said, his voice a little downcast. He hung up the phone and stood there for a moment, trying to take it all in. The next day, John couldn't stop thinking about Dakota King. The thought that she was still in critical condition bothered him a lot. Even though he didn't know her, he felt responsible in some way. "I need to see her," he thought. That's when he decided to go to Central Hospital, the fanciest one in the city. He knew she was still unconscious, but he felt he had to be there, even if it was just to make sure she was being well cared for. When he arrived at the reception, John looked around. Everything in the hospital seemed new, shiny, so different from the places he was used to. He felt a nervousness growing in his chest, like he didn't belong there, but he took a deep breath and approached the desk. "Hi, I've come to visit a patient, Dakota King," he said, feeling a bit unsure. The receptionist, a woman with a kind smile, looked at him and then at the computer. "Mrs. Dakota King is in the ICU, but visits are restricted to family members." John bit his lip, not sure how to explain why he was there. "I'm not family, but I'm the one who found her on the street. I called the ambulance and stayed with her until they arrived. I just wanted to know how she's doing. I know she hasn't woken up yet, but I'd like to see her, if possible." The receptionist was quiet for a moment, maybe thinking about the situation. "Well, it's not common for us to allow visits from non-family members, but I'll see what I can do. Since you're the one who helped her, can you wait a minute?" John waited, trying not to show how nervous he was. After a few minutes, the receptionist returned. "You can see her for a few minutes. I'll have someone take you to the room." He let out a sigh of relief. Thank you so much." Shortly after, John was taken to the ICU. When he entered the room, he saw Dakota lying in the bed, surrounded by machines and tubes. She looked so fragile there. John approached slowly, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. "Hi, ma'am. I'm John. I don't know if you can hear me, but I wanted to be here, you know. Just to sit with you for a while." His voice was soft, full of care. Even if she couldn't hear him, he felt that being there made a difference. He stayed for a few minutes in silence, just watching the woman and hoping she would get better soon. In the following days, John couldn't stay away from the hospital. He felt like he needed to come back even though Dakota was still unconscious. So, every day he went there. Sometimes they let him in, sometimes they didn't. He always arrived at the same time, and when he was allowed in, he would sit in the chair beside her bed, spending some time in silence, just thinking. Sometimes he talked to her, not knowing if she could hear. "Hi Dakota, it's me, John. I came back to see how you're doing. I came at the right visiting time today. Things haven't changed much here, have they?" He spoke quietly, with a slightly sad smile. "You know, I got fired because of that day, but I don't regret it. I did what I had to do." But this time, besides Dakota, John noticed a woman sitting beside her. She was young, with worried eyes, and always quiet. John gathered the courage to speak to her. "Are you family?" he asked, trying to start a conversation. The woman looked at him and smiled awkwardly. "Yes, I'm her daughter. My name is Lucy, and you, who are you?" "I'm John. I'm the one who found your mother on the street. I just wanted to help." Lucy's eyes filled with surprise. "You're the man who saved my mum?" she asked, her voice soft but full of emotion. "I didn't know who it was. They told me you come here sometimes to visit her. I have no words to thank you for what you did." John felt a bit shy, scratching his head. "There's no need to thank me. I just did what anyone would have done, you know? I just wanted to help." After that first meeting, John and Lucy started talking more whenever he visited Dakota. He would talk about his life, about the job he lost, about how he was trying to find a new path. "I used to be a doorman at a building, you know? It wasn't the best job in the world, but it was what I had. And now, after all this, I'm trying to figure out what's next. It's not easy." Lucy listened attentively, always with a look of care and gratitude. She spoke about her mother, about the struggle to see her get better, and how hard it was. "My mum was always strong, you know. But seeing her like this, in this state, it's really tough for me. But your presence here makes a huge difference, John. Truly." And so, day by day they continued to meet, sharing their worries and hopes, while Dakota kept fighting for her life. 2 weeks of daily visits passed, and John entered the hospital like he did every morning, expecting to find Dakota the same as before, still unconscious. He had gotten used to the sound of the machines and the calm rhythm of the room. But that day, as soon as he walked in, he noticed something different. Lucy was sitting by the bed, smiling. She looked at John, and before he could ask, she said, her voice almost crying with happiness, "John, my mum woke up." John stopped in the doorway, surprised, not believing what he had just heard. "Really? She's awake?" he asked, almost speechless. Lucy nodded, smiling. "Yes, a few hours ago. She's still weak, but she's conscious. You came at the right time." John walked closer, feeling his heart race. He looked at Dakota, who now had her eyes open, though she still looked very tired. She slowly turned her head, trying to focus on him. "Hi, Dakota," John said with a shy smile. "It's me, John. I'm the one who found you that day." And Dakota's eyes blinked a few times and she opened her mouth to speak, her voice weak but clear. I remember you," she murmured. "Your voice. I heard you." John was moved, almost lost for words. "I kept coming every day just to make sure you were okay," he said with a smile of relief. "I'm so glad you woke up." Lucy held her mother's hand, tears in her eyes. "We're so happy to have you back, Mum. John's been here the whole time, always caring about you." Dakota looked at him again with gratitude in her eyes, and John felt a deep peace inside him. All the effort, the visits, the conversations, everything now made sense. Dakota had come back, and he was there to witness it. As the days passed and Dakota continued to recover, she began talking more about her time in a coma. Even though she couldn't open her eyes or move, she told Lucy and John that she had felt his presence beside her almost every day. "I couldn't respond, but I could hear," Dakota said, her voice still soft but stronger than before. "Your voice, John. I remember you talking to me, even though I was unconscious." John was surprised, not knowing exactly what to say. "Really, you heard me?" he asked with a curious look. Dakota smiled despite her tiredness. "Yes, I heard you. I didn't know who you were at first, but your voice gave me a sense of calm, like I wasn't alone. I held on to that because it made me feel like I had something to fight for. Lucy, who was sitting beside the bed, looked at John with eyes full of gratitude. I always knew your visits made a difference, John, but hearing that from my mum, it's incredible. John shifted in his chair, still processing it all. He had never thought his words could have such an impact. I just wanted her to know she wasn't alone, he said simply. I didn't know if you could hear, Dakota, but I thought, maybe in some way, it might help. Dakota looked directly at him, with deep gratitude in her eyes. You helped more than you realized, John. I was there, trapped, unable to get out. But your voice, and my family's, pulled me back. It made all the difference. Those words touched John in a way he didn't expect. Knowing that his presence, even when silent at times, had had such a strong impact on Dakota during her recovery, filled him with a sense of fulfillment and peace. He hadn't just helped someone in a moment of need. He had been an important part of her recovery, even without knowing it. After a few more days of recovery, Dakota was feeling stronger. Each day brought more clarity about what had happened, and she couldn't stop thinking about John, the man who had saved her life. She knew he had visited every day, but she still didn't fully understand how he had ended up there, and she didn't know much about him. This bothered Dakota in a way she couldn't ignore. One afternoon, while talking to a nurse who often came to her room, Dakota made a decision. "I need a favor," she said, with a determined tone, though her voice was still weak. The nurse, who knew her well by now, smiled and came closer. "Of course. What do you need?" Dakota looked towards the hallway, as if expecting to see John at any moment, but she knew he wasn't there that day. "I want to know more about the man who saved me. John, the doorman who found me on the street. Could you help me find him? I want to talk to him. He didn't come today." The nurse was a little surprised by the request, but understood why. "He's been here every day. It's strange he didn't come today," the nurse said. "I can try to find more information. I'll speak to reception and see if I can get anything about him." Dakota smiled, grateful. The nurse left the room with the task of finding John, and Dakota leaned back on her pillow, anxiously waiting for answers. A few days later, just as Dakota was about to be discharged, the hospital managed to get in touch with John. He was at home when the phone rang, and the call caught him by surprise. "John, this is the nurse from Central Hospital. Mrs. Dakota King would really like to speak with you before she leaves the hospital. Could you come over?" John felt a bit nervous, but at the same time, he was grateful that Dakota wanted to see him again. He replied, "Of course, I'll come right now." Arriving at the hospital, John was taken to Dakota's room. When he entered, he saw her sitting up in bed much stronger than in the days before. She smiled when she saw him. "John," she said, her eyes shining, "I've been waiting for you. Come, sit here with me." John felt a little shy, but he smiled back and sat down in the chair beside her bed. "I'm glad you're better, Dakota. You look a lot stronger now." She nodded, still smiling. "Thanks to you, John. I wouldn't be here today if you hadn't stopped to help me that day. I don't know how to thank you enough." John scratched the back of his neck, feeling awkward. "I just did what anyone would have done, Dakota. When I saw you there, I couldn't just walk by." "Many would have walked by, John, but you didn't," she said firmly. "And I've been thinking about how you visited me every day. That was more than anyone would have ever done." He was silent for a moment, moved by her words. "I didn't really think about it. I just knew I needed to be here," he replied softly. "Knowing you're okay now is enough for me." Dakota smiled again, but there was something more in her eyes, a glow of gratitude that went beyond words. "I wanted to see you before I leave because I feel like our story isn't over yet. You saved my life, John, and I want to repay you somehow." John was speechless, feeling the weight of her gratitude, but also realizing that, in some way, this meeting was marking the start of something new. As they talked, Dakota looked at John with a more serious smile this time, as if she was about to reveal something important. "John, there's something you probably don't know about me," she began. "I'm the director and founder of King Industries." John blinked a few times, confused. "King Industries? he asked, surprised. The huge tech company? I've heard of it. But I had no idea you were the owner. Dakota laughed softly. Yes, that one. I try to keep my personal life more private, so that's why you didn't know. But now that I'm recovering, I feel like I need to do more than just thank you with words. John stayed quiet, unsure of where this was going. I want you to visit King Industries, Dakota continued. I think it would be good for you to see what we do there. My daughter, Lucy, will take you. She's helping run the company while I recover, and I'm sure she'll welcome you warmly. At that moment, Lucy, who had been listening by the door, walked in with a smile. It's true, John, we'd love to show you the company. You've been amazing with my mum, and I think it's the least we can do for you, she said with kindness in her eyes. John was speechless for a moment. He never would have guessed that the lady he had helped was such an important person. And now they were inviting him to visit one of the biggest companies in the city, maybe even the country. I don't know what to say, he replied, still surprised. I never imagined something like this could happen. Dakota smiled again, now with a look of satisfaction. Sometimes life surprises us, John. You did something great for me, and I want you to know it will never be forgotten. Lucy then stepped closer and said, Tomorrow, I'll pick you up and take you there. It'll be a new experience, I promise. John just nodded with a shy smile, still trying to process everything. The next day, Lucy picked up John as promised. When they arrived at King Industries, John was amazed by the size of the place. Huge buildings, rooms full of people working. It was all so different from what he was used to. Lucy noticed the astonishment on his face and smiled. Welcome, John. I know it's a lot to take in, but I want you to feel comfortable here, she said as they walked through the corridors. John was still in shock. He had never imagined he would be in a place like this, let alone be invited by such important people. After showing him around some areas of the company, Lucy took him to a meeting room. They sat down, and Lucy looked at John with a warm smile. John, my mum and I have talked a lot about you these past few days. She is deeply grateful for what you did for her, and so am I. If it weren't for you, she wouldn't be here today. John lowered his head for a moment, still feeling awkward with all the recognition. I just did what I thought was right, Lucy. I didn't expect anything in return, he said sincerely. Lucy smiled even more. We know that, and that's exactly why we want to help you in some way. I spoke with my mum and we'd like to offer you a job here at King Industries. We know you lost your job because of that situation, and we don't think it's fair for someone like you, with such strong principles, to be without an opportunity. John stayed silent for a few seconds, trying to process what he had just heard. A job? Here? He asked, a mix of surprise and disbelief in his voice. Yes, Lucy replied firmly. We want you to be part of our team. You'd start as my assistant. It's not a high position, but it's a start, and I think you'll do very well. Plus, we want someone we trust, and we've already seen that you're that person. John felt his heart race. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. A chance to work at one of the biggest companies in the city. It was something he never imagined could happen. I don't know what to say, he stammered, still in shock. Lucy laughed softly. You don't need to say anything now, just think about it. But whatever your decision, know that we'll always be grateful for everything you did. John took a deep breath and with a sincere smile looked at Lucy. I accept. Thank you so much, Lucy. I'll do my best. Lucy smiled back, happy with his response. I'm sure you will, John. John started his first day as Lucy's assistant, still unable to believe how quickly his life had changed. He walked into the offices of King Industries, wearing clothes Lucy had provided, and everything seemed new and different. The computers, the people talking, the sound of keyboards. It was all much more modern and fast-paced than the front desk environment he was used to. When he arrived at Lucy's office, she greeted him with a warm smile. Good morning, John. How do you feel on your first day? John laughed, feeling a bit nervous. To be honest, I'm a little lost. This is all so different from anything I've ever done, he admitted, looking around. Lucy laughed softly. I can imagine. But don't worry. You'll get used to it. I'll be here to help you with everything. We'll start slow, learn the basics, and soon you'll be handling it like a pro. John took a deep breath, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. "Thank you, Lucy. I'll do my best." As the day went on, Lucy showed John how things worked around the office. He was responsible for helping with meetings, organizing schedules, and gradually he began to understand how this new world functioned. It was challenging, but he felt excited with each small achievement. With every task completed, John realized he was starting a new chapter in his life. The old job as a doorman seemed distant now. He knew there was still much to learn, but he also felt he was in the right place. At the end of the day, as he packed his things to leave, John paused for a moment and looked out the window. The sky was clear, and he felt a calm he hadn't felt in a long time. "Who would have thought this all started when I stopped to help someone on the street?" he thought, smiling to himself. He knew his life had changed in ways he never expected, and for the first time in a long while, he felt excited about the future. "I think I'm ready for this new beginning," he said quietly, smiling as he closed the office door. As the months passed, John and Lucy grew closer, both at work and outside of it. At first, everything was focused on office tasks. John showed dedication, always eager to learn and help with whatever was needed. Lucy, in turn, was patient and kind, teaching him every detail with care. At work, they became a great team. John quickly got the hang of things, and Lucy began to trust him with more important tasks. He organized meetings, managed her schedule, and gradually took on more responsibilities within the company. "You're doing an amazing job, John. I don't know what I'd do without your help," Lucy would say with a sincere smile as they reviewed some documents. "I'm just doing my job, but thank you," John would reply, smiling shyly but gratefully. As the days went by, they started sharing more than just professional conversations. During lunches or coffee breaks, John and Lucy talked about their personal lives, dreams, and challenges. Lucy spoke about how hard it was to manage the company alone while her mother was still recovering, and John opened up about the struggles he faced after losing his old job and starting fresh. "You know, when I lost my job as a doorman, I thought my world was falling apart. But now, I feel like I've found a new path," John said during a quiet lunch. Lucy looked at him with warmth in her eyes. "And you have, John. You deserve everything you've achieved so far. I see how hard you work, and that's rare to find." Slowly, their bond grew stronger. It wasn't just respect and friendship that developed, but something deeper. John began to realize that he looked forward to spending more time with Lucy, and her smile was something that brightened his day. Lucy, on the other hand, felt a sense of trust and peace when she was around John, something she didn't feel with anyone else. The conversations became more personal, the looks lingered longer, and the two grew closer in a way that went beyond work. It was as if, without realizing it, they were building something special together, something that was starting to blossom naturally, without rushing. And with time, both John and Lucy understood that the connection they were creating wasn't just professional. It was the beginning of a new and unexpected chapter in their lives. Time passed, and Dakota, now fully recovered, got to know John better. She always heard Lucy talk about how he was an excellent professional and an amazing person. Dakota liked seeing them together, noticing how they treated each other with respect and care. To her, John was more than just an employee, he was part of their lives. "Mum, John is doing really well at the company," Lucy said one morning while they were having coffee. "He has an incredible work ethic, but what I admire most about him is his character. He always does what he thinks is right, even when it's hard." Dakota smiled, looking at her daughter. "I knew he was special from the day I met him, someone who sacrifices their job to help a stranger. You don't find people like that every day. I'm glad he's around, Lucy. I really like him." These words touched Lucy, who had already been noticing her feelings for John growing stronger. It wasn't just the way he worked or his calm and caring manner. It was his integrity, the values he showed in everything he did. And knowing that her mother also liked John so much only reinforced what she felt. One day, after another afternoon of work, Lucy asked John to take a walk in the company garden. They chatted about light things, but during a moment of silence, Lucy stopped and looked directly at him. "John, there's something I need to tell you," she began, her heart racing. Over the past few months, I've realized that my feelings for you are more than just friendship. I admire your character, your principles, and the way you care for people. And knowing that my mum likes you so much makes me feel that this is real. John, I think I'm falling in love with you." John was surprised, but at the same time something inside him had known this moment would come. He looked into Lucy's eyes and smiled, feeling the weight of her words and the sincerity in the air. "Lucy, I feel the same. I've been trying to understand these feelings for a while, but the truth is, since we started working together, you've been so much more than just a boss or a friend to me. You care about people in a way that touches me. I'm falling in love with you too." Relief and happiness mixed on Lucy's face. They stood there for a few moments, looking at each other, both knowing that what they had was special. It was something that had grown slowly, through daily care, honest conversations, and now it was at the surface. "I think this is the start of something really important, John," said Lucy with a smile. "I think so too," he replied, gently holding her hand. Sometimes life takes us down paths that seem wrong, full of obstacles and challenges we don't understand at the time. John knew this all too well. Losing his job, being fired for doing what he thought was right, it all seemed unfair at first. He felt lost, not knowing what to do or where to go. But in the midst of the pain and uncertainty, he chose to stick to his principles, to help someone in need without expecting anything in return. And it was that very choice that changed his life in ways he never could have imagined. The woman he helped was Dakota King, a powerful and generous woman who not only felt grateful for his kindness, but also opened doors John never dreamed of walking through. He gained more than a new job. He gained a new family, people who supported and believed in him. And over time, he also found love with Lucy, someone who saw the best in him and loved him for it. John realized that no matter how hard life may seem, sometimes those tough moments are just the beginning of something bigger. Those days of despair and uncertainty were actually the first steps toward a better future, a future he never would have known if he hadn't gone through those difficulties. Life doesn't always follow the path we expect, but in the end, everything can fall into place in ways that surprise us. The challenges, the losses, and even the disappointments can lead us to places we never imagined, showing that even the hardest situations are part of something bigger, something that leads us to a better destiny. John understood this in the best way possible. What seemed like the end of everything turned out to be the beginning of a new and beautiful journey. Please leave your comment with your thoughts on the story or what you learned. You might change someone's life with your words. Share it with that friend or family member who you think could learn an important lesson from it. At the end, I'll also leave a few more stories that I'm sure will change the way you see the world.